Nice.
All right. Actor, director, producer, writer. There's probably some other things. I'm not sure what order you would put those in. A. Russell Andrews, thank you for being here.
Start with dad. That's the best thing I've ever done.
Ah, okay. Very nice. Very
Yeah,
nice.
that when that's a fact. It's a fact. Yeah.
So, a question to start it off then. How often do you write?
I have to tell you, almost daily, but in terms of actual book and things of that nature, at least once a week because I'm about a quarter of the way through the second book.
Okay.
Yeah, I do pieces as I go. Sometimes I'm driving. I just learned that I can speak into the phone, my notes, and also on the laptop. That changed the game. So, but there's always something, a line, a paragraph, an idea, right? And if I can't come up with it, there have been times I've actually seen something out the window that makes me think I'll screenshot that picture, a word or two, and that's it because I put them all together at some point.
Okay. How do you deal with it when, because I think a lot of writers have this same thing. First of all, writers write. So that's the difference between a writer and not, is when you get those ideas, you get those lines, you get those, whether it's dialogue or a description or whatever it is, and you write that down in a quick note. It's easier now, I find, on the phone than it was carrying a notepad, but I would still carry a notepad if I didn't have the phone. But how do you
No,
deal
absolutely.
how do you deal with it when you get so many notes? Like, I often get to my notes feature on the phone and then I realize I have 20 pages of little segments or ideas of things, and it's spanned across different work. So some could be poetry, some could be music, some could be a line in a book that I'm working on or that I'm thinking about. How do you straighten all those out if you get a pile of that information?
Love that question. It's a great question. Um, because I am a quote unquote new author, right? In terms of this, the book I have now being the first book, but I've written passages, prose, short stories. Oh my God, 20, easily 20 plus years. In terms of the question and the notes, how I would put them together, I put them in sections. And I will say, because all of the things that I write are pretty much centered around the same thing, it's easy for me to have them in a category. That same thing ultimately being balance in life, in love, in finance, with retrospect to my children. It's always balance and coming from a place of fairness. Um, I've almost outgrown my ego.
Hmm.
Almost, right? So I can now write and speak with humility about the things I've learned and the things I've missed because of said ego. But again, as I write, it's going toward balance. So I know it could be music, it can be art, it could be that tree, it could be that homeless person. I know what I'm speaking of. It's just a matter of getting back to it. And you write, so you know sometimes that note may be 3 months old,
Hmm.
or that moment may be 3 months old. So it's not putting what I wrote in categories, it's what the hell was I thinking at the time? And
Right.
what did I want? What spurred that idea? That can be something trying to find that moment.
If you look back on things you've written years ago and life has changed, you've learned more, you have a different perspective, maybe, can you still feel that emotion in that writing
Oh
from that
boy,
long ago?
yes. Because, and again, I can't speak for everyone else, but I can say if it moved me to note it, if it moved me to now with the phone screen record it or whatever, if it moved me, it's here. And I don't mind giving credit to. people that have said things to me, I'll take the note, add the name. I don't mind saying where I was at a particular time. I'll do it because that's, I'm a theater guy, so I've learned so much from that experience. And one thing I've learned is not so much not to plagiarize, but not to be disrespectful of where that info or that moment came from. And I love to reflect on all those moments because they were good. Again, if I noted it, it meant something.
Nice, nice. It's then when did you realize that your all your work or all the writing that you did had this common thread of balance in it? Is it something that you've realized recently or you knew back then?
I knew back then, man, I got it honestly um, from my mom. And my father was around. I will never, ever disrespect that presence, but that nurturing and that expansive thinking and looking at the world through this POV right now came from my mom. My mom loved English. She loved literature. It wasn't her study. She was a nurse, but she loved it. But she always wrote to me. I still have letters my mom wrote to me. My God, I must have been sixth, seven, eighth grade. And so in trying to keep what you asked me, when I realized it when it's going to sound so silly, when it started to make sense to me, right? Because we can write things, you write past your girlfriend a note or whatever. But when it started to make sense, when I realized that I was writing about something because it affected me, and because it affected me, or the reason it did is because of something I learned from my mom, learning to look at things in a broad perspective. And what we do in my business and what we do is we take life and we reflect it back right to society from theater. I mean, we do on stage in 3 hours more than some people do in 3 months. And so the ability or the luxury or the blessing or whatever you want to call it of being able to see things and that they all matter, man, that I don't know, high school maybe.
Hmm.
But again, the reason for it or the ability to see it, it came from my mom.
In that reflecting back, and I'm not sure how to phrase the question here. Do you think it depends on the audience of to whether they understand that that's getting like a message in writing or theater or movies or whatever? It hits that emotion because it's reflecting back. I can only think of an example of being in church, and if you got something on your mind and you hear the sermon and you're like, oh man, this is directly to me. Like it's the message is it's real, it's on real topics, and every person in there could be feeling this is meant for me, and every person's going through something different. I wonder if that speaks to the origin of the message or the reception of the
You know
viewer or
what?
the listener.
My smile right now is a a um a smile of connection right here. It's funny of all the avenues we could have taken to answer this question, your reference was to church. And I am a believer. I grew up and was brought up Methodist and the whole nine, and I don't want to get away from your question. However, um, there is almost nothing that I see, do, plus or minus, that does not reflect or I filter through um, faith, religion. And not that I always have the highest bar. Again, I have to admit that. But in terms of a sermon, some of the things that I've heard so much in life that I remember, and I try to my best keep in mind when I'm putting pen to paper are sermons, but they weren't sermons of the fire and brimstone, right? They were sermons of what you just said, and that was a smile. The sermon was, okay, that guy or woman standing right there speaking, they've had some experience to be able to say what they're saying, that take the text and make it normal for me. They've had experience, and so they know what they're saying. And because they know what they're saying, I'm saying, oh, that's why it affects me. Because we've walked at some point the same journey. See, I think sometimes when we sit in our different churches under our different labels, of religion or whatever, I think we forget that we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all want to be eat. We all want to eat. We all want to take care of our children. We all want to have a good life and make our time, whatever that time is, right? Make it mean something. Some of us get 15 minutes, right? Proverbial. And some of us get none. But then there are some things, per the sermon that, oh my God, you never forget it. So, having said that, there are things that I hear, things that I see. How do I take those things and put them into the writing? I've learned to write for me and not for the audience. Everyone has a different perspective. But write for me if I like it. I learned this from an actor, classic old Black actor. And he said to me, he said, Russell, if you believe it, they believe it. Now, that's another side to that coin also. But in honesty, if you believe it, write it. If it feels good, write it. If you trust it, write it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what they're gonna think. And so I don't mind quoting people, but I don't mind taking my experiences. But I had to get there because by nature I'm insecure and not trusting. Not that I don't trust my words or my perception or anything, but I wonder sometimes, does it matter? And it all matters. It all matters, man. It's just a matter if you have the courage to write it because so much of what we don't do is in the graveyard because we didn't take that chance. I heard a guy say that the richest place in the world is a graveyard because there you will find ideas and concepts and everything that were never acted on. And so as I began to write my book, I've had this, excuse me, the story 38 years. And I never did anything with it because it's based, the book is based on a true story, but the moment was an actual moment I witnessed. And I was of the belief, man, who's going to care? Who's going to believe it? And why does it matter? It mattered to me. So I wrote it.
Do you think that it took so long to come out because the story was just like bubbling up, maybe is what I call it? Like you get to the point where you want to write something, but you either don't have the time or you don't feel like you have the skill to do it, or you haven't learned enough or seen enough to be able to write that particular story yet. And then at a certain time, the story is like, hey, it takes over your mind and it's like, this needs to come out. Is that what was your process and why'd you write it now?
That again, bro, you get it, your job, because that's another very good question. However, I have to answer it like this. I'd like to say that I have ideas. We all do, and I'm in the arts, so you run across and experience things. But I'd like to think that I came up with this grand idea for a story, and I didn't. The experience and what I witnessed was the story. My job now was, how do I take that hour and a half that I just experienced and make a book of it? So I had to go back and add elements of my life chapter to chapter that actually fit what I saw, because the young man and the family I saw looked like me. So again, I'd like to say that I had this brilliant idea for a story, whatever the story is, but you know, the family, wherever you exist, the creator, the story was given to me. However, the challenge was, what am I going to do with it? Yeah, so it wasn't, I'd love to say I'm the creator. However, I did create up to that point, but man, I was blessed with something. And the challenge was, you know, what are you going to do? Because that's the thing in life. It's not what happens to you. What are you going to do about it? And I had it for 38 years. I never wanted to write or be a writer, and especially to write this for any monetary gain. I just never wanted to forget the family. And here we are.
Yeah. I firmly believe in the idea of the instrument, not the hand.
Oh, man, yeah.
Something we are acting is, I think we have sentience, we have control over what we do to a point.
Right.
And I think we're presented with these opportunities or ideas. And then you can say, well, are you going to do anything with that or not? And maybe those ideas, I think it would be too much ego to think that idea was only presented to me, because I think it's presented to many people. So it's who's going to pick it up and run with it. So what is I think that answers a normal question I have, which is, where do you think ideas come from, or where do you think creativity comes from? Is it something that is from within us, where we manifest these things and ideas through our experiences and what we see? Or is it something from outside of us that is working through us and saying, this is the message, this is what, and the message is presented to you because you are a type of person that cares about balance, cares about justice, cares about all these things, that's what determines where that decider, whoever that is, whatever that is, presents those ideas to you? Or is it a mix of both? Is it something that is manifest within you from your experience and also allowed that idea to you from somewhere else? What's your view on where ideas come from?
Personally, I think that, well, of course, personally, but I think that, well, I know we all have stories and we all have experiences. And when we get concerned about what other people think of our stories and experiences, that's when we stifle ourselves. We put these stumbling blocks in front of us. The origin of your question is, where do I think the ideas come from? I'm going to say this to you. I just read something on the internet within the past week, and I forwarded it because I thought it was brilliant. Whoever receives it, whatever. The question was about, if I'm correct, the origins of civilization. And forgive me for this, but I'll tie it up for you. And the woman who was speaking, and it was old. I think the article, at least the picture, was old, black and white, could have been in the 20s or 30s, but I don't know if she was an anthropologist or whatever she was, but her answer was how scientists had found these old bones. And I think it was a tibia, fibia, whatever. And they found that it was broken, but it had been mended, right? And that they put together that it had been mended, and that meant that some other person, right, being, took the time to help mend the broken bone of this person. And there is where civilization starts, right? When we start to care for each other, because we all have the capacity to care. We all have the capacity to give a damn about something else besides ourselves. That's where civilized thought, that's where civilization comes. So to try to wrap that up, if I can, the idea, man, we all have ideas. We all want something. We all want to make a contribution. But if I can again refer to my mom, what you feed your children is what they eat, what they consume. What you feed yourself is what you eat. But a majority of our self-talk to ourselves, repetitive, majority of our self-talk is negative. We say no to ourselves more than we say yes. We say more sometimes, no, sometimes before we even have the information. We just say, no, it's not possible. The ideas are there and they're swirling around. It could be free association, could be anything. But when we can get out of our own way, when we can step back and say it's valid, even if it's not, it's worthy of thought, it's worthy of process. And the ideas are there. They're in everything you see. I mean, listen, you had an idea before you had a microphone. Something said, I can do this. Something said, hell, it's, again, society, humanity. Something said there's a something on the other side of that ocean. There's something to be gained from giving and sharing and caring, right? Even if you don't believe, even if you have a limited, way of viewing again where the source is, you have to know that's better than anything we've ever done in our lives. And if we can stop for a minute and see that the world is bigger than us, the ideas that are there, they'll help us, even if we don't market them. Acknowledge that they're there, acknowledge that gift. You don't have to be politically on the same page as your neighbor, but his values mean something. So if you can get past the messenger and accept the message, we'll all benefit from it. That's a long way around to say that there are ideas everywhere. Again, I'd like to think that I'm the source and the creator of all these great ideas. But no, I am, though, very curious and I care. And I believe that everyone has purpose. I don't have to like it, but they have purpose. And I only think about the things that I missed growing up in all my years because I was so closed, so narrow, and most of that was just utter fear of not knowing. So when I realized that there was far more out there than there was in here, I not only matured, but I added to whatever it was that was going to help me contribute.
I found in my writing, and I see it more in poetry than anything else, but I feel like there is a connection with some other place that allows you to have some ideas. If it's not presenting the idea to you, it's certainly working through you to organize the ideas within you. And poetry like that for me, poetry is
Right.
like no other type of writing, because it is, I would definitely call my poetry free verse and strange, and you get it or you don't. And going back to that thing that you said, if you like it, then there's somebody else out there that likes it. It's just, are they ever going to find it? That's just the chance of the world right there. But
I think that, and risk is not the correct word, but I think that's also the challenge for the minister. His message has to be broad enough to be inclusive, but it has to be specific enough to make sense. In that, there is a very poetic nature in that, right? There's a very poetic nature in and this is me just spitballing because I have no science for this, but there's a poetic nature in the internal feeling that we have, and I want to put it on paper. What you were just saying to me about your poetry, and listen, man, it doesn't have to rhyme, it doesn't have to make sense at the time, but it will, because life, like history, like everything else, is cyclical. It'll come back around. It'll make sense if you stay with it. And again, presenting your truth, it doesn't have to be Joe's. It doesn't have to be Lynn's, right? It just has to be yours. I guarantee you they'll find it. All right. All that is in the eye of the beholder. Beauty in the eye of the beholder. Well, yeah, that could be true. But if you stand there long enough, you don't have to like the art, but you'll start to see yourself in it, or start to see yourself trying to view it and make sense of it. If that alone doesn't grow your POV of that poem that we read that's yours, or that art that's on that wall in that museum, we got bigger problems. We got bigger problems than whether what we think is important. Um, we are all touched by everything, but just acknowledging it. You mentioned poetry. I did some study at in DC at the Folger Theater, Shakespeare Theater in DC. I had a one of the classes was poetry, and the instructor Ralph Zito. Yeah, I say that tongue in cheek. He was very serious about his name. He took us out for a walk one day, and we were just walking and talking. He was a very interactive teacher, and we saw a feather on the ground. And he said, "What's that?" Of course, it's a feather. And where did it come from? Yeah, a bird. But then he expanded the thought. Does the bird need this feather? Did it shed the feather? Because it didn't. Is it hurt? Can it fly? What he was trying to get us to do was not so much be engaged with the bird, the cycle of life, but how we can never look at a feather again and not think about what was the purpose, what's going on, was it a fight, was it nature's process, what am I going to do with this information? And so ultimately, in all of that, that's poetic in its sense. It doesn't all have to rhyme, but it all has to mean something. And I think it does. I wish I had the ability or the discipline to write poetry because I hear so much. I love music, but not just the rhythm, but the rhythm of thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the rhythm of emotion. You know how music is sometimes the great equalizer to humanity and
Mm-hmm.
race, and class, and culture. You know, that's the balance. I wish I had that. Um, you know, history will, everyone's individual history will do what it does. But I wish I had that because that will, you know, kind of broaden my perspective also. Um, yeah, man, but, you know, congrats on being a poet as well as everything else because that says a lot.
Well, the poetry angle, I think I worried after the first year when I was like, I'm just going to take my poetry that I started when I was in high school, maybe before high school, up
Mhm.
into however long it takes to get enough poems that are decent enough that I think could make a book. And
Mm,
I'm going to put that together and then I'll be done with poetry. I can move back to the prose, to the science fiction, to just adventure fiction, things like that, that I like writing as well. But I I showed up so often in that year of writing the poetry and trying to take the stuff I've already written and then come up with new things that
mm,
my goal was to write 10 a month. And then I
mm,
figured I'd get a few out of that that could be in a book. And I ended up writing more in a month than I expected. And after you do that for a year and you show up for that for a year, you're open to those ideas and you write them down when they occur wherever you are, and then try to compile them later. That goes back to that first question of when you get all those notes together, how do you deal with them? Because that, I think, not only you have a writer that writes those things down, but then they get this big pile of stuff and they go, wow, that's too much. It's too much to go through. And then you lose that information there. It's that
Oh,
whole
of course. Yeah.
cemetery graveyard thing again, all those ideas unacted on. So with the poetry, I showed up so much for it. And I thought, well, okay, enough for a book, and then that'll be it. And then I did that year, finished that book, put that out, and then the poems still kept appearing. The writing still kept. I get a little bit of dialogue from a book I'm thinking about or working on, some scenes, some ideas of that, but that poetry always shined through. And I think it was always there from when I was a kid. I just didn't understand what it was, and I didn't answer that call, I guess. So I think it comes from a different place. And if you're open to it, it's always there. Like every time I think I'm not going to be able to do this poetry anymore, there's one more book and now that's done with poetry. It's still there. And whether somebody says it's not worth doing a book about or not, I go back to that same thing of it means something to me. And I feel the emotion of it. I feel the tone, the pitch, the hidden meaning that I may not even know of when I first wrote it down, but it's there. So I think somebody else will get something out of that too. And with music and tone for humanity, I think that's a huge deal. I think that does bring people together. And then the religious side of me looks back and goes, well, that's why the angels are singing. That's why there's choirs. That's why there's all that. It means so much to us, whatever we are, more than human or the spirit in us, the spirit around us, however you want to look at it, that
Absolutely.
that is that energy that brings us together and that describes things to us.
I will add or offer this to you. I do not remember the author. It's been years. I think I was in college at the time. It was a one-word poem. And again, all of it is open to interpretation like art. And the word was yes. No period, no punctuation, just yes.
Yeah, and that's a thing where I think it comes from we have to understand that from what our experience is, our perspective, the things within us and the things outside of us, and what we're looking at or what we're feeling at the time. Because I think there are times where you could say, "Hey, let's read some poetry." And I'm not a big public poetry person. Like
Right.
I don't feel the need to go to a poetry reading. I don't feel a need to read my poems in public. I think it's a
Right.
private thing. It's almost like a Bible study, if you will, except you can do that with people and it's not as weird. But I think you have to sit down with that work for a while, think about things, be in that mindset of, okay, I'm going to experience this poetry. And you're going through a book and you get to a one-word poem that is yes. And if you're in that poetry mindset, that means a whole lot more to you than if you're in the grocery store trying to figure out what you're going to buy that day. And even then it can mean something, but yeah.
I got one for you. Sit and look at your children. And again, I used to get on the floor with my children so I can see their POV. I learned that. I wish it was my idea, but it changed the game for me. Because it's one thing to be above them, speaking to them, but being eye to eye. That means that life going up for them, they can always either literally or figuratively look people eye to eye and know that they're comfortable. I say that to say, look at your children, look at your life, look at your wife, look at your dreams, everything, and just say yes without it being, yes, I did it, yes, I can do it, but just, yes, I accept it. That was me when I read yes, because I think at the time I read it, I was in a absolute free fall, as young men tend to be at points. But yes meant something to me. Yes, it's real. Yes, it hurts. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I can get out of it. Yes, I'm reading this, and yes, I'm trying to make sense of this one word poem. But again, it all made sense. It all made sense. So, whether my interpretation, whether you write for yourself or whether you do or don't like, open public events, spoken word or whatever, man, you have a contribution from whatever seat at the table. You have a contribution, and it's worth being heard. At worst, it's going to spur debate.
Hmm.
At best, you're going to find people who are appreciative of thoughts that maybe not their own, maybe bigger than their own, but it's a different perspective. Because I truly believe, and this is me trying to go back to balance and whatever, I truly believe we are far more alike than we are different. And I think sometimes, and over the years, historically or otherwise, we've been led to believe that that person is our problem, and that's not true. That is the biggest lie on the planet. No, he's not your problem. As a matter of fact, he or she is your answer. But if you believe that there's something wrong with them, you believe that they are a problem, you will never, ever get to balance and peace. You never will. And in that, in poetry or writing a book, a story, whatever, man, again, the courage to accept that we don't know everything and that everything we write has to be accepted or liked. No, just tell the truth, man. Tell the truth. We'll all grow from it. If we don't, again, we got bigger problems. But poetry from a grown man, right, who doesn't want to live it out loud. I can only imagine what's in there that hasn't been put to paper yet, or what's in there that you haven't printed yet for everyone to see. Um, I can only imagine, man. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong in any of it. It may not have been ironed out or worked out, or there may not have been some verbal exchange, right, or POV, but you're not wrong. They're your ideas, they're your lived experiences. But the courage is being able to share them and not taking personally other people's feelings. They didn't grow up with you, they don't know you.
Yeah, I think I see it more as it's that broad message of the minister, where if you believe in the faith, whether you believe in it or not, I mean, it's going to work. Is if the minister is inspired to say something or to put a service together, or anyone, whether they're a preacher or not, and they're inspired by some words and then they share them, then that broad appeal is going to be felt by the audience. Now, some people aren't going to receive it. Other people are going to see it as like the feather, like, oh, that's going to change the way I look at things forever.
Right.
Or I really like your idea of the what's the purpose for. That's a great one. I mean, that's almost that's as good as the yes poem. I think when you think about it, is what's the purpose of this? And I word that as, is it me? Like if something is happening, I go, hold on, is that me? Am I the problem here? It is what's going on here? Like I thought about making a TV show called "Is It Me?" And you have these social situations that people
don't
are
say
in.
that publicly. Write it down.
That's all
Someone
right.
will take that's a
I
great
haven't
idea.
I haven't acted on it yet. Somebody else can run with it. But where you go through a drive-through and things don't work out the way you expect them to, and then you go, "Wow, is it me? Am I the one putting out this energy that's wrong, or whatever?" And then at the end of whatever scenario, you have some sort of, I don't know if they need to be a professional counselor or anything like that. I'd settle for just a wise person that says,
I get
you know,
yeah.
yeah, think about this way and this way and this way and this way, and then
Mhm.
it would help the public problem solve, I think, because
Mhm.
because that's one of the big things I've learned in life so far is I've struggled to see things from other people's perspectives. So
Mhm.
developing that empathy, I think, is great because then you can go, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. I see what
Mhm.
I'm doing. And I think that's a different version of what's the purpose for. Like,
Well,
is
may I ask you, and no, it's your job, but may I ask you, not seeing it from their perspective, was that a lack of experience or a sense of denial on your part?
I think it's just not knowing. For
Okay,
me, I think
okay.
there's other people, and maybe I'm sure there's an imperfect person here.
Oh,
So I'm sure
absolutely
there's
wrong.
times
Yeah,
where
join the
I
crowd.
try
Yeah,
not to
yeah,
see something.
yeah,
But
of course.
as a 21 years old being a trooper in Virginia and your job is to go out there and write tickets, order maintenance through traffic control.
Of
If
course.
you are so empathetic with everyone that you always looked from their perspective and you're
And
like,
do
oh,
their
well, I guess
job.
I'm not going to write this ticket, then
Yeah,
you're never going to write anything. But that
right,
doesn't mean you have to write everybody. I mean, you got to listen to the story. Is the person
right.
speeding because they're trying to get to the hospital because their wife's having a baby or their parents in the hospital?
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
I'm not going to hold you up. So it does depend on, do you believe them at the time? So that's tough, but it's,
Yeah, but that also puts you in a position of how do I help them help themselves? And
yeah.
sometimes that ticket, as much as I've hated ever getting one, sometimes that ticket may have added 10 years to their life
Hmm.
or their perspective. And yeah, financially, is it going to be a hit? But also, you have to think about, man, that guy in that lane next to you, or woman, have to stop that in that lane. They didn't know where you were going. So those fast lane changes without letting them know, chain reaction.
Mm,
So
mhm.
again, doing your job, well, there was some incentive to do those jobs respectfully, but doing your job saved a life you will never meet. You will never know. It will educate someone in ways you will never know. So while it may look like, oh my God, the red lights are behind me, whatever, sometimes again, that's the creator grabbing you in your collar and saying, Russell, slow down,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
That's
I have seen as I've gotten older too is, and I don't know if it's age or experience because there's plenty of old fools out there. So maybe it's
oh,
experience and introspection that it's it helps to look at things through other people's point of view and
mm-hmm,
then try to be a good example. Like think about yourself to the point of and what I am is what I'm doing a good example if somebody else is watching. Now, whether that means you're on a walk with
mm,
your dog and
that's
yeah,
character.
if
That's
you
character.
see
Yes.
some trash on the road, are you going to pick that up? And if you pick that up and nobody's looking, are you going to pick it up? If there's people there, are you going to pick it up? So then you have to go,
Right.
oh, okay, I got to be a good example to myself. And now I got to pick it up
Exactly.
just for myself.
Yeah,
So
and see that goes back to what Mama taught you. And
yeah.
see, yeah, that's character, man. What you do when no one is watching. And so, absolutely, absolutely, I won't tell everyone to pick it up, but it kind of, if you can't give the homeless guy $1, is there benefit to saying a prayer for him? You'll
Mm,
never know. But does it hurt you? Ultimately, dollar, homeless, whatever, how you feel, how you move about the life, uh, or in the world that we're in. Man, that piece of paper, unless it's something disgusting I can't get with my hand, I cannot tell you how many pieces of paper I picked up
mm,
or let somebody cut in traffic or help someone get their groceries in a car, right? Or spoken to. And I work with a lot of, over the years, homeless and things of that nature and food situations here. But there are times I've sat on a park bench with people And I'm the first person they've spoken to in weeks, or the first person who's spoken with them in weeks. There has been very few times, I can't put a number on it, that I've not walked away from that understanding and knowing we are all one trauma away from that park bench. We are all one accident, one school shooting, one job miscue, right? Everyone that gets fired wasn't stealing. Sometimes they were doing the right thing, but without permission. So, yeah, pick up that paper, man. I do. And I live by it. I've taught my kids that. And I'd rather let my days, um, I won't say come to an end. I'd rather look at my days looking back. I'd rather see having done that than not.
I agree. With your experience directing and acting, how do you think that affected your writing? And did you use what you learned there into the writing or crossover back?
Man, as a director, you are essentially an artist. You have paintbrushes and you have maybe one character or five characters, and what you're doing is asking them to take their experience and their perception of what they have with that text in front of them. And you're asking them to say, hey guys, girls, ladies, let's make this story. Let's paint this picture. And so with directing, I can have an idea, but I think the best directors, of which I will not include myself, but I'd like to think I think in that way, is we get out of the way, right? We hire and cast, as it were, accordingly. The best people you can for a job or for a particular play. And you listen. That is the best thing I've learned about teachers, directors, whatever. Listen. Listen, they're helping you tell the story. Sometimes we can be myopic thinking, okay, I got it. I want to do well. There's more than one way to do everything. If there's only one way to direct a play or a film, I quote my friend Charlie Brown. If can but one person do your play, you might want to check your play, right? If your view of how you direct is the only view, you might want to step back, right? I can have an idea. I can read the play for its value, its content, what it means, line for line, scene for scene. But he or she might have a different view. It may be better or it may help the story, but I can't be so narrow that my way is the only way. And I think the best directors, again, I'd like to think I at least think in that way, are open to suggestion and whatever gets the story told, because at the end of the day, it's about the play. It's not about me. It's not about the actors. It's about the play. Serve the play. And I think if we're able to do that, all of the other stuff, man, listen, directing is so personal. Acting is so personal. And there's so much passion involved and lived experiences. There's no way we can all agree, but we can agree to disagree and keep moving. We can agree on the story and get that done. And I think that is the wonderful part about directing, is the rehearsal process. That is the discovery. By the time you see the play or the film, we've had a month or two or three to fight and spit and cry and dislike and learn and grow. And by the time you see it, all the money's been spent. All the time has been spent. All of that empathy you spoke of about being able to see it through someone else, it's all been done. And that's a luxury but that's the part the public never sees. But that's the most wonderful part about directing. And I only speak of theater. I've never directed TV or film of any kind.
I hadn't thought about it like that before, but when you're have those chances of practicing for a event, that it's like that stuff you're doing in your mind when you're writing. You're thinking of all these different directions, these different ways of saying things, and then you include all these other people. You've got many more perspectives and ideas and tweaks, and you've gotten so much exploration and different ways of saying things. Or what if I enter from over here instead of over here, and what if I stop here and here? That okay.
And all those will change the direction of the play or the mood. And one beautiful thing about it is where you're coming from, where you're going. So when you come on stage, what are you bringing in? You have to bring the outside in. Other than that, you're just, but again, you learn that as a director, and what you said so important. If he comes in from that way, it changes everything, right? And so how do I put that into what I'm doing? And having an open mind and being open to suggestions or ideas that were not yours. Keep in mind, some of this is not without ego, but being open to an idea that wasn't yours, we all are better for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't work, at least you know another way it doesn't work, and then you can go on with
But
that. It
that's
might
why you
spark
do
something
it
in
over
someone
and
else.
over and just see exactly. I
I
mean,
wonder.
there are things I've said. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I guess there's not much difference in screenplay versus stage, because you're just filming it versus maybe in a theater, you have to think more of audience perspective of how's the show going to be for the person back there versus the person right up here. And in the movie or screen, you can focus that perception a little more and say, this is the way you're observing it instead of this other way. So
I don't have the artistic, intellectual capacity to speak on that particular thing other than to say stage is more of an actor's medium. We get to experience and explore and do whatever. However, TV and film is more of a director's thing. That story, that's it, all that's already said. They're just trying to plug you in and help you make that story. So when you go back and you see things like, let's say recently, Oppenheimer, right? Fabulous actors, fabulous story. But what they have that a lot of films and TV don't have is the time with the material to be able to study, to be able to put all that together. So I won't say one is better than the other because the processes are so uniquely different. However, I will say this, that they have time in the editing room, if you will, to fix whatever mistakes happen on camera. There's a tightrope unseen on stage. It's live. You know what? Dude, you are out there. You are out there. And again, if you believe it, they believe it. One person or 1,000. Your job is to tell the story. I can't fix it if you make a mistake. And I made them. Dude, I've made them. And I've gone on stage, my first entrance, and said the last line of the play, and it wasn't my line. I don't know what the hell I was reading the play backstage, and I was just so excited. My first big equity play, and I run on stage, and it wasn't. Matter of fact, I'm not even on stage at the time the line is said. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but having said that, it's live, and there's a trust factor with the other actors that you can clean up in TV and film in the editing room. Can't do it in theater. You live out loud and live in theater.
Yeah, I imagine the audience is a huge difference too. Uh,
No.
Doing it in front of an audience versus there's probably a lot of I mean, you could have a lot of people there when you're filming something, but nothing like an audience that came to see the show instead of came to make the show. So
Oh,
it's
man, that's perfect. Absolutely. Because again, and it's not that the crew on the film or TV set doesn't care, but
mm,
they're trying to get the shot.
yeah,
That's their job. Everyone, the boom operator, the gaffer, the light, everybody has a job, right? And their job is to make sure that that scene is well lit, that the DP has his view, background. Everybody, it's like the military. It's a chain of command. Everything has to work, right? In theater, it's like that until the play starts. Then, bruh, you either know it or you don't, right? And
yeah,
you'll find out. But it is the audience is so beautiful because one audience may be on the floor laughing, and one audience the next night, same play, may be pensive and rather studious in a way, but they see the same play and feel the same thing. They just may not react. And see, so the insecure actor is concerned, oh, they weren't laughing. Okay, they were listening.
mm,
Or these people were laughing at points that weren't funny. Well, because you may have been overacting. You
yeah.
know, yeah, it's it's open to interpretation, man. But that high wire act, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Anything in the world.
How do you tell the difference between, or maybe how do you explain bad acting versus good acting if you're the director and you have somebody that's doing something and yeah there's space for them to feel out the scene and practice it, but how do you put that into words if you're saying you're either overacting or what? How do you explain
I'm
that to
going
an
to
actor?
say I'm going to answer that from the position of having been both,
Okay.
doing the bad acting and also seeing it. Um, I let's start with the immediate. We know when we're kind of hamming it up for the audience. We know when we're over the top. We know that when we're playing it for laughs or whatever, or overly dramatic, it's already there. Most plays, 90% of your work is already done. It's in the play. Your job now, tell the truth. You've already gotten the job, right? However, I will say this. So much of the time, we become insecure because there's not a certain reaction, right? The biggest problem with that already from jump is that you're not in the play now. You're in the audience. You're worried about how you are perceived, what
Mm,
you look like, as opposed to being there in the moment in the play. A friend of mine said, um, Russell, you can do whatever you want as an artist. You can do whatever you want, but you can't tell people how to receive it,
mm,
right? They bought the ticket, they've got the babysitters, they parked, they did whatever. They came to see the performance. You can't tell them how to like it. I say that to say when we are in our worst, and again, been there, I'm claim it. When we are concerned about that and not the story, again, we're not in the moment. We're not only cheating ourselves, but it's disrespectful to the other actors on stage
mm,
because now you're out there doing this solo performance and they're depending on you for this ensemble activity and you're posing and posturing and doing all these things. From a director's standpoint, you know what you've set, right? In terms of rehearsal, it's going to open the opening night, blah, blah, blah. But what happens is the play is going to grow because the familiarity, the comfort, the fluidity of lines and movement and everything. All that's going to go as it should. It's the same thing in practicing a sport. You're going to get better. But when your better gets in the way of the storytelling, that's a problem. As a director, the hardest thing to do is to tell a quote unquote star or someone who's stuck in their own idea of who they are that they're not serving the play. So now we're not talking about directing the play, we're talking about managing egos. We're talking about managing people who, again, I'm quoting my friend, who confuse the play with their appearance. There's a difference. And so, how do you do that diplomatically? How do you say that to them without, again, stepping on toes or hurting egos? And sometimes the best manager of a situation is never heard from. One of the most important things on a film, besides the editing, is a producer, because that producer makes things happen that you will never see. You will never see. You will never see the verbal and emotional disrespect that comes with being a producer. You wear so many hats. You have to appease so many people. And it's so that the film gets done, the TV show gets done. It is such an unsung job and place to be in, but it is so rewarding. And a director, if you can not see him or her, and that project is good, he's done a good job. He's a director. He's not on stage. His job is to shape, to form, to help them tell a story and get out the way. If that's not enough, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you.
Kind of like a sculptor. You work on it and then you show it. And you're not a part of the statue.
You can't stand there next to the sculpture, next to the art and say, look at me. No, man. No. Art is not, we'd like to think so. It's not for us, man. It's for the people. It's for the people. And
I think that thing you said about serving the play, just as a parallel, goes back to the thing of what's the purpose for, that those tie in nicely. And I like that. I like it. I feel like when things tie in, you know, you're on the right path. You're in the right way there. That at least you're consistent. I like it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you find? And again, here we go. I mean, your chair in your poetry, in all of it, as a young man, even now, was there or is there a through line, a consistent thought, a consistent idea or POV?
I like that question, and I ask that a lot of myself and people when I talk to them to see, is there a recurring theme in all your writing, whether you know it or not, if you've ever thought about it or not, thinking about it now, is there a theme? And a theme that goes through all of my stuff is, or a thing that ignites my tenacity and what I care about. It's injustice. I don't like injustice. I don't like hypocrisy. I don't like wrong and evil. So that's part of it. But the theme through all the poetry, I think it's looking for connection. It's trying to make sense of our existence. I think that's probably one of it. I need to think about that more. I don't know.
Yeah, but no, what's in there, and that again, from this seat, I hear, and we spoke of this earlier about our common ground, right? Is that you care. And see, sometimes, listen, caring and and weakness they're not enemies, man. Caring and strength, rather, are not enemies. You can forgive my neighbor in the motorcycle. Um, you can care and be strong at the same time. Actually, I think one feeds the other. But I think that you care about humanity, you care about justice, you care that people have these elements of hypocrisy or injustice, that you care about it. That's the beginning of all of it. Because me too, you know, I don't care what part of the town you're in, bro. I care about the same thing. I do, and I want to eat, and I want my kids to care about those things, because after that, what else matters? If you care, I mean care, and it's broad, and you have to. It's another thing. You have to have courage to care. You have to have courage to love. It takes courage, bro. And I don't mean like passionate love. I mean to love, because under that umbrella is respect. Your neighbor, yourself, your journey. Yours and mine are different. Yours and your neighbors are different, but respect them and not measure yours or theirs by yours or theirs. To care, man, that's it. That's the essence of what you said to me, of your poetry, that you care, that you're curious, that you want to know. And so, what is your contribution? I think about that when I write. What am I saying? Do I run it through this filter of, is it important? Should I say it? Will it move the needle? Or am I so arrogant that I'm writing for a response, which is mostly social media? You know, everybody gets courage when they have their thumb on the phone, right? But that courage to put it out there, to say it without being concerned of not being disrespectful, but how it will land if you know it's right. And we learned that years ago as children. See, our personality and character pretty much were apparent at 6 and 7 years old. But like you said earlier, there are some old fools out there.
Yeah.
Somewhere somebody didn't keep them on that right path, or there was entitlement, or whatever the hell it was, right? But that you care and that it means something. Imagine what your thought and your care would mean to the next person. Think about it. They the same thing somewhere along the way. And again, we can debate history. I don't want to get in that because it's not fair here, and it doesn't speak to the immediate you and I. But at some point, we were told that that person right there is the reason that we don't have whatever it is we want. That's crazy. Because when we back up and see that we get more with them than without them, but you have to care. And other people have to mean something to you. And their plot or plight in life has to mean something to you. It's not simple, but I think the answers are more here than out there. And we know it takes effort not to care.
I like that you brought up courage, because I think if I had to pick a favorite word or a favorite idea, it's courage. That I think that's what character and everything revolves around, is courage. I mean, maybe I would hear arguments about faith, but I think for me as a human, courage is a thing that I can look back on times in my life where I didn't have courage in a situation where I wished I would have, and I go, man, I can't let that happen again. So I like the Marine Corps' honor, courage, and commitment, because I think
Mhm.
those are 3 words that explain a whole lot. And I don't know if it's a reason I became a Marine or what, but well, I think the reason I became a Marine is because when I was a kid, I wanted to have a sword. But I think it just worked out. It worked out nice
Okay,
that
okay.
honor, courage, and commitment are the thing, because I think
Mhm.
it's action. If you don't have courage, you're not taking action. And if you don't
No.
take action when you see something wrong, or when you see something that needs to be done, then what are you doing? Are you in the play or in the audience, as you said? Are
Yes.
you the purpose for whatever? What are you a good example to yourself, to other people? Are you learning from good examples you've seen? So
Mhm.
yeah, taking action is the thing. I think that's what led me to policing, because it took away that question of, are you going to act? And it answered it with, you are going to act. You're going to do something when you see something wrong. When you see somebody in need, you're going to do something. And the best part is, you get trained into what to do. So that's
Mm.
great. And you think about it a lot beforehand. You're running through all sorts of scenarios, maybe not the exact same thing that you get confronted with, but something close enough to where you're not a person standing there in awe saying, I can't believe this is happening. And you're the person that's taking action. So whether it's
Mm.
military, policing, whatever, I think you can still live that life and feel those things having not been in the military or in civil service. But for me, I think that's what drew me to those things. And so in
I think
writing,
there are
that's what I
more
care about.
people who believe that than don't.
Mm,
I believe there are more people who think like that than don't. I tend to believe, again, I have to keep history in perspective. I wouldn't be me if I didn't. However, I don't believe people go to the military and or to the police force, as it were, as we are now, with the idea of just having this ultimate power and control. I think
mm,
they really care. I think it says a lot to get up and leave your family, put on that belt with whatever said pistol, sword, whatever you are on the other side of the world, defending whatever we're defending, or helping people defend their way of life, to to be so unselfish and to say, I am going to commit to this goal. And you're doing it with the guy next to you, the guy next to him, or whatever. That says a lot about the human being. And I think sometimes our messaging about our soldiers, our messaging about our police force is so convoluted, because again, there are the lines in the sand. I just quoted some. There's the lines in the sand. It's either this or us or them, win or lose, right or wrong. But there is not that union of understanding, and I think that's where we lose our conscious thought of. And you said it. Am I doing the right thing? Making the right choice. If I were him, would I be doing what he's doing? And sometimes in your job past, there was no time to think about that. You had to make split decisions. And man, listen, until we walk in another person's shoes, but for the grace, but for the grace, we never know what we're going to do, but we know what we're taught, and we know it's right. We know it's right. And if we can run it through that filter first, in our lives, in our careers, in our art, or just in our basic humanity with other people, is it right? We can start there. It might not be the last answer, but we can start there in care and courage. I think I learned something too, because I never had to say that, but it makes sense now. Care and courage.
mm.
Man, if you can put that, if you can arm yourself with that, you can do most of it. Yeah, you can make it most of the way through life with those two things. Yeah,
Yeah, I think there are military and police and just people in general are people. So there's all kinds of people. So
Mhm.
there's good and bad. And you hope that maybe in the policing structure and in the military, the people that are defending others, there's some sort of checks they have to go through to maybe filter out the the really bad people. But
Right.
I'm sure there's people that get through. That comes back to that courage of, if you're in there, are you going to have the courage to say, when you see the bad
Yeah.
person in whatever position, are you going to take action?
Yeah.
And I think
That's fair.
that's the great part about policing and just being morality. It's the great part about morality is
Mhm.
you have some sort of standard to where you can say, this is a standard that may be unattainable to me, may be unattainable to a human. That doesn't mean I'm not striving for it all the time. And when I
Absolutely.
fall short of it, I understand it and I'm trying to get better. And I see that struggle in everyone else. But there does become a time where you got to separate the bad from the good so the bad don't hurt the good. And when you
Mm.
talk about policing or military being um, selfless, I can see that angle, but I also see the selfish side of it, which is I don't want to be in a position where I can't act. And I don't want to
Mm.
be in a position where someone's going to hurt someone else, especially someone I care about, and I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. So I think it is a little bit of the selfish side of I don't want to feel powerless in a situation, but in having the
Yeah,
training, I think is the helpful part. So
that's a grown man observation.
it's
That's
it's
that's kudos, bro. That is a grown man position.
it's getting into that mindset of it, which is here's a segue for you. Here's a segue. When you were playing the detective in Better Call Saul, do you find yourself as more of a character actor, or do you do you try to understand the motivation and the perspective of that part you're playing? And how do you do that, if you do?
It's so funny. It's so, man, life is funny. I was talking about that episode, if not yesterday, maybe day before, to someone I don't even know. That particular thing, I let life's experiences help me with something that on paper is so simple. There's a guy sitting in pies. He's weird. We want to know why and what happened to the baseball cards. It's that simple. But I looked at it from this brand new, eyes wide open. This guy is sitting in a pie, really? So beyond the cards, the baseball cards, what idiot takes off all his clothes and sits in a pie for some kind of enjoyment? I swear I was talking about this not 2 days ago. And now you ask the question, you're basically saying, do you believe it or not? What do you have to do to believe it? I let truth be truth. And man, are you serious? You're sitting, you're butt naked in a pie? Really? Regardless of what you do beyond that. So I let my curiosity take care of that. And that dude, oh my God, Odenkirk, but he is so, it's such a cliche in our business. He is so generous in terms of his art, his craft. He gives such truth. He believed that he was representing this guy, right? And I can be outside of it trying to be the actor, right? Or I can take what's given to me by Mr. Odenkirk. And it was so believable, so truthful that if I'm out here, you were asking earlier, and we were talking about overacting, that's going to stand out. And that won't move the scene. That won't help it if I'm trying to posture and be the policeman. I had to be as dumbfounded as I actually was. And it felt good. It felt good because, again, it's a real phenomenon, this what they call pie squatting. I didn't know. I learned something. I had no idea, man. But yeah, just again believe it, and they believe it. And I played like the 8-year-old who just saw something for the first time, and that's where it was. Yeah, that's that's where it was.
So for all your parts, theater, TV, wherever, how do you get into the character's mindset? What are some of the things you use?
If you study, of which I will say yes and no in terms of my study, I was in it, went back and studied, and then I was kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool early, but ergo courage. Um, I've been fortunate that there are things that I've been asked to do or was fortunate to do that aligned with what I thought as Russell, a person. Um, there are things that in the character, my faith was challenged, Russell. And so I won't say it was easy. As a matter of fact, it was more difficult because, and the difficult part was, I've been thinking this, I've been feeling this, but now do I have the courage to now put out there what I truly believe, what I truly feel? There are things we have to do that we are not aligned with. But again, can I do this? Can I separate my personal, right, and be able to tell the story? To get into character, I think taking the text and believing it, and again, setting aside what we, if you are fortunate, which I have been, I must say, that again, it aligns with what you think, your history, your thoughts, your feelings, cool. But if it doesn't, am I so closed, if not afraid, that I can't do this work based on it not being something I think? I had a project I did for HBO that I was a kind of quasi racist principal or vice principal. And it wasn't that he was racist, but he cared about his own that had not been given opportunities over years. But it came off really bad, and it was a comedy, by the way. But I learned something in there, that I can do this. I probably felt that way. But for me to try to fix it or to perform in a way that doesn't hurt anyone's feelings, that's not the job.
Right.
The job was to play this guy, and I loved it, and I did it, and fortunately, it worked. You know, get stopped in the grocery store now because of it. But um, the getting into character, there's something to be said for the method actor, the guy who wakes up, and if his name is Joe, no one can call him anything but Joe all day. You know, on set, off set, on stage, off stage. That's that. I get it and I respect it. Um, but there's also this thing of knowing your material, knowing it so well that you could do it in a cab, on the corner, in the shower, at the store. And some people have to get into character. And they do, and I respect that. And I hope I'm not pissing off any of my colleagues or coworkers having said this. But you know, it's a character. At the end of the day, trust it. You've done the work and it's working. Trust it. And we can't be so consumed again to confuse our presence for the party. We can't, man. We are blessed in this business anyway to be able to affect people and we never know what it is. So staying true to the character and telling the truth, because you never know how you're going to affect that one person or all 1,000. You never know. Um, but do it and trust it. And it gets old. I will tell you, sometimes you're 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months into a play and you're saying and doing the same thing every night. The challenge is how to make it fresh, right? There is no one answer. However, the idea that someone out there is seeing this for the first time, and that you and them, they are experiencing this moment for at the same time, and that you can look at it as everything you do. If you did it, if you knew you were doing it for the last time, how would you do it? Your job, your poem, your conversation with your children, your wife, your spouse. If you knew this was your last one, how would you do it? Man, I take the first day and the last day with the same energy. You never know. You never know. I don't look at it as, you could die tomorrow, but you can also not have the luxury of that experience tomorrow. It all matters. To me, it all matters. So to roundabout the long way, I'm sorry to answer your question, how to get in character. I want to be in character. I desire to tell that story of the young man trying to buy a house, or the young trumpet player, or the lawyer, or the detective who thought he had seen everything until the guy with the man. Believe it. Believe it. That's me as part of our character building.
I like that. I think it all goes back into whether you're in the play or you're in the audience when it comes down to you're doing it for the 20th time and you're starting to bore yourself, but you're trying to make it fresh for everyone else. So it also goes back to that feeling of if it's real for you, it's real for them. So
Oh
you
yeah.
have to keep the intensity up, and you can't change but so much in a theater situation because that's that's what you practiced. You have to execute that within some sort of limits as much as you can. When I was doing public speaking as a trooper to military places for, they call it safety at sea or a safety stand down when they're getting ready to go on leave. And we talk to them about drinking and driving and things like that, that I've seen enough of them to where I was bored listening to other people, the way they presented it. And then I thought, if I was in the audience, what would capture my attention? So you have to walk that line of entertainment and information enough to where people are going to hear the message. So you got to, I tried to keep it
And
solid on the message. You got to keep it solid on the message, but also capture the attention so they hear the message. And at times you get to the point where, I mean, I don't think it's ego, but I think it's just fact, but maybe that's ego masquerading as fact. I was pretty good at it. So I enjoyed doing it, and people seem to enjoy it. And I was like, okay, that's good. I like doing this. Too much is going to be too much because I'll get sick of it. But you have a few times where you'd have to go and you were at a place for like 5 different talks. So they would bring people in for a 30-minute or an hour talk, and you'd give the same one over and over again. And you're like, oh man, I got to change up some of these jokes, some of these stories and situations, so I can not just keep their attention, but keep my attention on it. So it's still real for me. And also for maybe the senior chief in the back of the room that's in there for all of them, because I don't want the senior chief to get bored.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Have you ever, for what it's worth, did you ever see yourself in some of the young people you were speaking to?
Oh, as far as their questions and their like
Their
that point of
questions
life.
and also how they were receiving your presentation. Were they
Yeah.
bored? Did they know it all? Did they care? Were they ready to get out? Or were they eager? Did they respect your presence and your history and experience?
Yeah, it runs the gambit in there. You got
Mm,
1,000 people you're talking to, and you can't make eye contact with all of them, but
with
you
one,
try
yeah,
to
okay.
engage. And if you see somebody that's maybe not into it, and this is back before cell phones a whole lot. I got out of policing in 2012. So it's it I'm glad it's not recorded because I'm sure my supervisors would have had problems with the way I talked to them. But you're trying to entertain them. But it's if you saw somebody that didn't look like they were having a good time or they were bored, you're like, well, what can I do to get this person involved? Or let me try this different story and maybe it's going to resonate with them a little better. I didn't want to call anybody out and embarrass them.
Right.
So
No,
it's
no, no.
you're there for a thing they have to go through. And then being in the military, going through those things myself and seeing, hearing the talks or watching the videos every year, the same videos over and over again. And you
Mhm.
think there's got to be a better way for this. How can I capture the attention if I was the one that was responsible for either putting that video together or putting that talk together, how you would do it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. In
what are you,
public safety.
what are you working on currently?
Well, currently the book and moving the book. Currently shaping the short film. I was just in a short film competition. The script, as it were, LaChris and I, my friend and publicist, who's also a director, we made it out of the first round, but not to the second one. But it's okay because again, it's new and it's a learning experience. As it stands right now, that's what I'm doing. I just did a commercial for Enterprise. I do all of it. I do commercial, TV, film. So as the work comes, we pursue it. We are in the midst of um, what is the traditional pilot season. It's been slow for me. I have to do a whole rebuild or whatever. However, it's out there. Um, the business has changed so much with streaming and all the other outlets that we're still on the other side of post COVID. And I'm saying all this for a reason. So much of now the actual in person interaction with casting directors has changed because of COVID. It did two things. Um, it allowed the producers and studios and casting directors to realize they don't have to be in the room now. They have us self tape. Like I have lights and backdrops and everything. So do so much of that. Try to get it as right as possible, if I can say that. Send it in, hope that it hits. Working on right now, self tapes.
Mm.
And sometimes they're fast and furious, 2 in a day, 4 in a week. And then sometimes you might not get one for, oh my God, a couple of weeks. Here's the thing, our averages as, let's say, the working actor, not the superstar, but the working actor, our averages are less than baseball players. And we have to make careers of it. I
Mm.
mean, a batter can go, I don't know, bat 200 and make millions, right? Man, if we hit 1 in 20, we're doing good.
Mm.
We're doing good because there are 120 plus thousand people in our union. Of those, you have to figure safely half for male, half for female. You have to narrow that down to at any given time, whether it's stage, film, TV, commercials, anywhere between, it used to be 5%, but let's for a safe answer, 10% of all Black actors are working in any medium at any given point. That's not a lot. There are more opportunities than when I started, but that's not a lot of opportunities. And because of, can't blame it on COVID, but because of the way things are going, where it used to be located in New York or Los Angeles, Atlanta's growing now. All of that used to be located there because of the internet and the ability to self-tape and submit yourself. You can be in Memphis, you can be in Chicago, you can be in Seattle and submit. The pool is bigger, but also the demand for the time and attention of a casting director or producer now to where they would go through 50 tapes, now they may go through 3,500 tapes for one part in one show.
Wow.
9 times out of 10, they won't see them all. They'll take the ones that have come from certain agents that have certain clientele or that have booked that room before. Now, there may be a diamond, maybe a gem out there they've never seen, but it's hard to get to them. But for us, the working journeyman actor, what happens is we have to depend that the casting director or producer or director will weed through all of that to get to us, or at least that group that we're always in. So, again, another long way to say what we're doing, self-taping, hoping to crack the code. And they're wonderful projects. But, you know, in the meantime, you do theater, you write books, you know, you eat, man. You know, you Uber, you work from home, you do whatever you have to do. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast. Yeah.
Yeah. It, how much thought have you put into doing your own production company then?
I have Stage Walkers is my theater producing company, and I committed so much time to getting my kids out of school or whatever. It's still there, very successful, I have to say. But having a production company is, hell, I'll be honest. I think it's better for us as opposed to having all of these small production companies to be a bigger company and have little satellites within that. I understand individuality. Everybody wants to hang a banner with their name. I respect that. But I think if we have a bigger pool, a bigger source, that we have a lot of directors, a lot of producers, and a lot of actors under this large, unselfish umbrella, I think we get more done. But to be the individual, and I want to be the head of my company, I don't, I don't want to be the head of my company. I want to be part of a company that we all do. But that's going to require commitment from other people and everyone. That being said, I don't know if I really would like my own company as much as being a part of something that's big that serves more people, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to follow along with your career and what you're working on?
I will start with the website. It is of course, the www.arussellandrews.com. That is the website. It has everything that I'm doing and that I've done. It also the link and the connection to the book, which I haven't mentioned. My book is Shoes, and all that info is there, and everything I do is there. And of course, you can Google. You can find everything you want there. But regarding my career, it's all there. We also have this website, imdb.com, which is Internet Movie Database. Every actor, every TV show, every film, anything you want to know is there, right? And they have IMDb Pro, but that's if you want to spend that money. But you can find out anything you want, but just from this chair, arussellandrews.com will give you what I've done, history, the links, my theater stuff, everything. It's there.
Yeah, I like your website. I've looked at all the tabs and everything. It's a good looking
Cool.
website.
Thank you, brother.
Easy to navigate, good to go through.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, LaChris, my friend, the publicist who connected us, she built the site. She's
okay.
Yeah,
she's a great job with it.
multi abilities.
Yeah, that's what you need. That's
Oh, yeah.
I'll put the link to that in the show notes so people can go to your website if they don't remember it or whatever. It'll be in the show notes. Also, I have the 2 links to 2 of the YouTube spots you have where you're talking about some of your work, and then I'll put a mention of the IMDb on there as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I
cool.
definitely
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time on this. I like his good subjects. I like the way they tied in together, and I feel like I did learn a little bit of the difference between film and stage, and I hadn't really thought about it before of how different the 2 mediums are. Like I was under the impression that it's pretty similar, but I think they're a lot different than each other.
No, yeah, similar in intent, but different in how we get it done. And again, there are people who can speak on it far more intelligently than I did. But I think the truth of it is we respect all of it. Those of us who do it all. There are some people who are just TV film, some people just theater, and some of us, do it all. But there is gigantic respect for all of it because there are our actors, co-artists, or however you want to put it, that can work that camera. Oh my God! I mean, they can do it and do it well, and I pay homage to that as they do when they see good performances on stage. That is an all open commitment, and it says a lot about each of us to be able to respect the mediums. So yeah, if you got anything from what I said, respect that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit if you can stick around for a minute.
My brother, yes, sir. I'll wait. Yeah.
All right, sounds good.